So this is US import dependency on Mexico and Canada, or the combined share of imports from Mexico and Canada from each US state. Obviously, there are certain states that are way more reliant on these two neighboring countries than others, like obviously Hawaii. Hawaii's only at 6%. Huh, you don't say. It's almost like Hawaii is an isolated island on the back end of the globe. I find it fascinating that Montana is so dependent on, well, likely Canada, since Canada's right up here. I don't know how much exactly they're importing from Mexico into Montana, but it can't be that much. Remember, this is the combined share, so both Canada and Mexico coming together. Montana is actually the most reliant on those two countries, but even though places like New York and Pennsylvania might border Canada, they're really not that reliant. New Jersey even less so. Now, they don't border either Mexico or Canada, but they're only at 11%. Still, regardless, all these percentages would add up over time across all these states. I mean, first of all, 28%, this is just for the US overall, it's the average percentage. Assuming for some of these bigger states like California, even though they border Mexico, I think a lot of their imports really come from China or Japan, most of Asia. That's like a West Coast thing. Whereas the East Coast goes, a lot of their imports are probably coming from Europe. If you only border either Canada or Mexico and you're landlocked, then yeah, you're very likely going to be, well, very reliant on the neighboring country. The Great Lakes states obviously have, well, the Great Lakes. Texas gets the best of both worlds as they border Mexico, but they also have the Gulf of Mexico here, or Gulf of America, whatever you want to call it. Look at how dependent Maine and Vermont are. I think Maine is really interesting just because they do have a coastline. They are out there with the Atlantic, so they really like getting stuff from Canada, I'm guessing. Holy crap, what happened to this comment section? Basically, everything has been deleted. Yo, what happened here?
50,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town.
No more avocados from Mexico. Texas is looking like what I expected, but I'm kind of surprised about Florida. Florida does a lot of trading with Brazil and the rest of Latin America. I love trains. Me too, buddy. It's gonna be interesting to see some of these states have to turn to other countries, possibly around the world, that aren't Canada and Mexico. Which ones are they gonna choose? This is how bad things are looking in Kursk. Obviously, Ukraine went into Russian territory back in 2024. Within a week, Ukrainian forces had captured more than 900 squared kilometers, also grabbing some pretty key Russian cities as well. And it got even bigger headed into September, but this is when Russia launched their counteroffensive. They quickly retook some territory from Ukrainian forces on the left flank. Keep in mind that there's a difference in the red. The light red is claimed Russian counteroffensive. The red is asserted Russian presence. Now watch as we slowly enter 2025. Obviously a lot of, there was a second press into Russian territory by the Ukrainian forces. This was in hopes of diverting more resources, that the Russians would have to pull back from here and help out this area. Unfortunately, that did not go well. They pretty much took that out immediately, and here we are as we enter into 2025. Now it's January, it's into February, and they're pretty much almost completely knocked out by March. Russian forces are claiming they've already retaken this key Kursk town. I'm also noticing a couple other light blue up here, though, maybe in an effort to, again, try to get the Russians to divert. I mean, here's the thing, this is not good, but the Ukrainians were never going to be able to keep this. You got to zoom it out a little bit. In reality, their whole plan here was just to get the Russians to stop focusing on the Ukrainian land that they took away. That way, these Ukrainian forces could maybe attempt to take some of that old Ukrainian land back. This was supposed to be a distraction, which it definitely was, but it didn't really turn out the way they wanted. Actually, on the day that I'm recording this, they are still in several other very small parts of Russian territory, but who knows if they're gonna get out of that. This is a very interesting map because it's also showing Ukrainian natural resources and critical raw material. This war reminds me of the Iran-Iraq war back in the 1980s. It started in the year 1980, obviously, but it went on through the entire Reagan administration for 8 years. It's just the Iranians like slowly creeping forward, which, I mean, this is actually a pretty good example because it has already been 3 years. In other words, just attrition warfare. I'd suppose if the Ukrainians still held all this land still to this day, it'd be a great negotiation tactic, obviously a nice bargaining chip, but it looks like this is not going to be a factor at all. There is a supposed energy ceasefire that's going on, whatever the hell that means. We are outnumbered, all the active military personnel. We've got 1.3 million in the US versus Russia, who is currently at 1.5 million. Does this include some of those North Korean soldiers they keep talking about? In fact, Russia is outnumbering the vast majority of European NATO nations. If Ukraine was in NATO, they would have the second biggest military personnel. This is obviously during wartime, though. These numbers are way more than it would be during peacetime, which is something else to keep in mind. I mean, obviously, if there was a massive World War III that was happening, all these NATO countries would have way more people in the military. I mean, especially I'm considering the US. Remember that the US on this chart is the biggest by far in terms of population. Russia's just barely over 100 million people. Meanwhile, the US is at 300 and almost 40 million people. So even though this chart might seem to be a little bit scary, in reality, it's not exactly like this. Crazy, Luxembourg's got 1,000 active duty personnel. I didn't think they'd have anything. Albania only has 7 times more. This is interesting to see the new NATO country, Finland, involved, only 24,000. But you know what? Sweden's also only at 24,000, and they're also the newest member of NATO. Iceland is the only NATO member without a standing army currently. Again, if NATO were to actually go to war with Russia, though, these numbers would be way higher. But something that is in the back of my mind is China's active duty personnel. They're over 2 million apparently. Yeah, reportedly 2,035,000 here. But again, as I just got done saying earlier this week, military personnel is not the most important thing. Well, especially not in today's age with drone warfare, but logistics, technology, resources in general, doctrines, all that stuff comes into play. So many examples throughout history of like way smaller forces beating way bigger forces. What was Russia and Ukraine's numbers prior to, let's say, 2013? Russia had about 750,000 active military personnel, and apparently Ukraine might have only had 180,000. Imagine the monster NATO would be if every single member had troops and a budget at the proportion of Ukraine. The US alone mobilized 15 million during World War II. Also something that just popped in my head. Besides Russia, Ukraine now has the biggest army in Europe. The stock market, the first 100 days of a US presidency, starting with Obama, Trump in his first term, Biden, and Trump in his second term. I think you already know where this is going to go. So 100 days is about a little bit more than 3 months. So this is like the first quarter of the year of a president serving. And well, as you can see, we are living in unprecedented times. The markets have almost dropped 10%. And keep in mind, it actually hasn't even been 3 months left. We're only 50 days into this first term. So will it stabilize here? Will it get worse? It doesn't look like it's going to bounce back. Eventually, maybe, but I guess the question is the time thing. And that's why everyone's kind of freaked out, is because it dropped so quickly and so far down in the span of like 2 or 3 weeks, really. Would love to see this compared to more presidencies. Realistically, 2 out of 4 of these lines are Trump. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Only going back to 2013 with Obama. Why not go back with Bush or Clinton? Very good comment here. Reminder, the stock market isn't the economy, though. It's a market price level that mostly represents expectations of future potential to receive corporate earnings calibrated against risk and opportunity cost. It's gambling. We're gambling. This is all just a game. I feel like it's not necessarily a good idea to look at this as an overall picture of the economy. There's just so many other things you gotta factor in. But it doesn't look good, I'll tell you that. Taxes haven't gone up in every single state over the last 25 years. In fact, in a majority of the states, they've gone down a bit. The only places that have increased since the year 2000 is California, Oregon, and Washington. Washington's actually the state where taxes increased the most at 7% tax on capital gains. But also there's Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Pennsylvania, New York, Jersey, Delaware, Maryland. Jersey actually increased more than New York. Oh, we can't forget about Hawaii. The states left off the list, though, there are 7, I believe, that have no income tax. Oh, and Alabama, Virginia, and I guess North Dakota, they don't really have the same listing. They just didn't change. And Colorado. So some places have no income tax, so it can't really increase. But keep in mind, there's other ways for the state to get money, like sales tax. This is just showing the difference in the top marginal income tax rate. It's actually been reduced the most in Iowa. All right, I mean, I guess I'm gonna have to go to those cornfields out here. It's the only way to avoid these taxes. This is crazy though. Washington at 7 over California. I mean, it really does show like it represents the boom that Washington has had in the last 25 years. So much of the tech sector. Everyone always talks about the no state income tax in Texas, but they really get you in the real estate tax. If you want to own property, you're gonna have to pay way more than anywhere else. I mean, it's on the upper end, maybe not the most. And again, this is based on the top tax rate. How about taxes for low or average earners? But Washington has no income tax. That's what I was looking for. And Oregon has no sales tax. See, there's so many different ways for states to get in money. Just looking at this map alone with just this one category doesn't really help provide us a bigger picture of everything that's going on. Now, Washington number is incredibly misleading since it applies to less than 1% of the population. It's funny because when you just Google states with the most taxes, there's no like clear consensus, because obviously everything depends on your own personal situation, how much money you're making, but then also the choices that you made, like how big of a house you decided to do. Are you renting? Do you like to purchase a lot of things? Because, you know, the high sales tax is going to really get you there, even if there's no state income tax. I mean, generally, as you can predict, the states with some of the highest taxes are going to be like California and New York, but a lot of these charts are just kind of useless. I mean, there's just way too many ways you can define this. Do not let this map fool you. This is a little bit misleading. These are the top countries losing people to immigration. Not to be confused with immigration. These are the people leaving their country to go to a different country. There's a ton of facts factors playing into this. I mean, do I even need to really explain Ukraine? I think we all know what's happening and why they'd be losing people leaving the country there. But another huge factor is percentage of their population. Like, okay, India almost lost 1 million people. But do I need to remind anyone how big India actually is? There's almost 1.5 billion. So comparatively by a percentage number, it's not that high. What is a lot higher though is the numbers coming out of Pakistan. They're at 1.6 million and actually the biggest on the map. They are losing the most amount of people, and comparing that to their overall population, that is much more significant. They're not even at 250 million people. And even smaller percentage is China. They're almost at that same population as India. Well, reportedly, we don't really know. The Chinese government tell us things, but we don't know for sure. According to this, they only lost 500,000 people. Here's a big one to note though, Sudan. Sudan lost 1.4 million, only second place to Pakistan. Now that's crazy considering they only have 50 million people. So what is that? Like they lost almost a whole 2% in the last year? That's crazy. Almost 3%. It's actually 2.8. Once you move the decimal over, put the percentage sign, you know, I'm a math. I mean, it's still cool, don't get me wrong, to just see the overall numbers, but generally speaking, no matter what's going on or what year it is, this part of the world's going to be losing a lot of people just because this is where all the human beings actually live. Another one that jumps out is actually Greece. Greece not particularly being a very populated country. I mean, they only got 10 million people living here. Oh, and that's been falling since 2012. Still, Greece only losing 1.5% of their people. Finally, I'm sure a lot of people are going to look at Mexico losing 100,000 people. Mexico has over 100 million people, so this really isn't that much. Yeah, Mexico didn't even lose a percentage. Not even a percent of a percent. Is that right? No. Of course, top comment is people complaining that it should be by percentage. Yeah, 500,000 people out of China's population is basically a rounding error. Same for India, 400,000 for, yeah, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like the smaller countries, that's way more crazy. Here's the percentages I was looking for. Sudan is the highest on the list. Then it's Nepal. Then it's Greece. I don't know why Nepal just went over my head. It's because they were surrounded by all these other massively populated countries. Pakistan, India, China. They're just trying to stand out right here. Let's go Nepal. Yeah, some of these numbers are so low. Mexico is one of them. Look, oh, India and China are the lowest if you look at just percentages. You really got to just look at these top three because we do know what's going on in Ukraine. But yeah, Greece, Nepal, Sudan. I would also take a look at Pakistan. I mean, there's lots of craziness going on in Venezuela. Even by a per year basis, this is an insane amount. Yes. I imagine everyone in Pakistan must know at least one person who left. Oh, so are these maps not considering how many new people came into some of these countries? Because I think we'd see more European nations listed. I wish we had numbers in Russia because, yeah, they're definitely not going to tell us accurate numbers. Cuba lost over 1 million people since 2021. That's a whole 10% of the entire population. This map sucks. I swear, most of these comments are just people complaining about the maps we're looking at. Here's the top places these people are going, though, or at least the places that people are striving to go. This is a different ranking based on career advancement, earning potential, employment prospects, premium education, economic mobility, and high livability. If you're looking to go to a new country, you really want to go to these places. Starting off the list, you got Portugal and Greece. Okay, that's a little ironic. Just saw how many people are leaving Greece, but considering all these things, Greece is getting a 56 number, and we got Hungary, Malta, Latvia, then Hong Kong. Keep in mind, it's not necessarily easy to immigrate to some of these places. I mean, that's the overall problem. Here comes Italy, then Austria, then New Zealand. Okay, the UAE getting into the top 10. I mean, it would nice to be a citizen of the UAE. You don't want to be there for a job. That's what I've heard. Or Qatar either. They will work you pretty bad. The UK and Canada come up next in the 70s. Canada's actually in the top 5. Australia is just ahead of them at a 76. Then we've got the US. The US is only in third. There's 2 more nations ahead of the US. The second place nation is Singapore, and first place is, of course, Switzerland. Switzerland getting the top score at 84 because of the earning potential. Well, to be fair, Singapore also has 100% earning potential. Career advancement, they're ranking a little bit harder in Singapore, but employment prospects, oh, there's lots of jobs. Education-wise, it's not the greatest, but if you already have your degree and then you're trying to immigrate, then maybe Singapore's a good option. Economic mobility, oh, high livability. I don't know, I feel like there should be more city-states in Europe included, like Liechtenstein or Luxembourg. Where's Luxembourg at? Monaco's got to be nice. I wish they also showed this side by side with like how easy it is to migrate to these places. I'm sure it's not. I'm sure these numbers have got to be really low. I just want to say I do not read the comments before I look at this stuff. I swear the top comment is always saying what I'm saying. Greece, Hungary, Latvia, what? Well, US scores high in the premium education category because you gotta pay a premium for the education. I had a job offer in Switzerland Switzerland once. The salary offer was insane until you look at the price/rent. Yeah, the food, it's so expensive there. I spent like $25 on a hamburger in Switzerland. That's after the conversion rate, obviously. Keep in mind, you have to make a lot of money to live in a lot of these places. Yeah, something I'm definitely thinking about here is like, just like with other maps, this thing is highly subjective. It's going to be subjective based off all those little categories. You could throw in whatever you want in there. Everyone's going to have very different opinions. If you're from any one of these countries, you might be banned from ever coming to the US. This is the proposed new travel ban by Trump. 11 countries have a total ban. That's Venezuela and Cuba, definitely North Korea. I mean, currently these are all countries that you're highly advised to not travel to. North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, Yemen, Afghanistan, Eritrea, Cuba. However, it should be noted there are new red nations on this list. Libya, Sudan, Somalia, and then for whatever reason, Bhutan. Why Bhutan? The United States has placed Bhutan on its travel ban list, citing national security concerns and irregular migration patterns, with a 37% rise in Bhutanese visa violations. Bhutan is literally ranked as one of the world's happiest places on earth. Interesting, Bhutan has more than 10% of its citizens overstaying their visas in the US. Now as for the orange countries, these are visas that are sharply restricted. There's 10 countries here. There might not be an outright ban, but pretty much close. That would include just Haiti in the Americas, Sierra Leone, South Sudan, Eritrea, Turkmenistan and Pakistan, Myanmar and Laos, and then obviously Russia and Belarus. That one is pretty self-explanatory. I'm actually surprised that one's not in red, to be honest. Finally, the lightest countries on the quote-unquote ban, it's a 60 days to address concerns. So these countries might be left off the list, but they have 60 days to, I guess, given to demands that the US has. Pretty much all of them are in Africa except for Cambodia over here. This is crazy because I've always looked into traveling to Chad just for the memes. Literally all the comment sections talking about why Bhutan of all places is banned completely. It's important to note that during Trump's first term, the courts actually blocked the government from enforcing the first two versions of his travel ban, but the Supreme Court eventually permitted it once it was rewritten. It's going to be very interesting to see which countries get off this list or actually do in fact get put in the orange or red zones. And if you'd like to be in the red zone, check out the so stupid. Check out makeshift.com. We got the Big Blue Blob, the Kingdom of France, as well as Prussia with some pins. You get Poland. They're only here for a very limited time. Europe is dying, but not in every area. In the green spots, they've had growth in their population, but that is very likely due to migration. Migration in, but also out of the country. I mean, obviously, there's people that are leaving rural areas to move to big cities. That's just like a worldwide sort of phenomenon. It's not even a phenomenon. That's just where you make the money. Look at Ireland, looking as green as ever. Something I think people were forgetting about, though, going back to the 1990s, like this is over 30, this is a 30-year difference. You would think that the entire map would be green. Like that should be just a given. The 30 years. It's a whole generation. But a lot of these places have declined in the last 30 years. A lot of them in the Balkans. I'm assuming the places in white, not in red, it stayed the same. So Russia's mostly stayed the same. But look at this massive green like mushroom here. I don't even know. That's just, it looks moldy. It's not been good for the Baltics. A lot of red. Or I guess this is pink. I find Germany, of course, fascinating because you can literally, as always, see East Germany reflected in, well, the rest is West Germany. And this is the side of Germany that does tend to take in more people. I'm thinking of the recent German elections too. This side also voted for the AfD. The lowlands entirely green. The country very similar to Germany, where you can see a lot of interesting things reflected on the map. Italy, where the north has a very different experience than the south, and that stays true in this instance as well. Greece is almost entirely pink except for this island. Crazy to see just the Mediterranean side of Spain grow. Meanwhile, everything else, like especially Galicia, people are just leaving that. Human beings still like to very clearly stay along the coast. Norway's just kind of remained the exact same, but again, even remaining the exact same isn't necessarily a good thing. You would think you would increase over the course of the last 30 years. Iceland not doing quite as bad as I would have expected. Question for any Greek person reading this: why is Crete so popular, especially compared to the other islands or coastal regions? That was that island I was talking about, blooming for lots of things going on. I figured it was going to be a big tourism thing. Good demonstration of how the EU's freedom of movement can be a curse as well as a blessing. It's easy to forget that all the doctors, teachers, etc. didn't just come here, they left somewhere else. The densely parts are getting it denser and denser. Yeah, people live in cities. Make Ireland green again! Everyone also particularly talking about the nation of Latvia. At least Estonia has a lot more green, and Lithuania has one dot, but yeah, Latvia, it's been rough. Don't even want to know what the map's gonna look like in another 30 years. Do you want to become US president with less than 25% of the people actually voting for you? Believe it or not, it can be done in our really weird system here. You don't need 25%, you only need 22.9% of the voting population to vote for you, and you can still win the electoral Electoral College. You can literally get 0 votes in a lot of these states. You can get 0 votes out of Washington, 0 votes out of Arizona, 0 votes out of Colorado. Nebraska doesn't matter. Missouri, almost all of the Rust Belt, even some big ones like Florida. Everyone loves to talk about Florida when it comes to the U.S. system. As long as you get 5 million in Texas, about 500,000 in New Mexico, about almost 8 million in California. I'll be honest, like, I think you can make it even lower than this. I can't help but get that idea out of my head. Like, can't you become U.S. president technically on technicality if just nobody votes and just maybe like one person in California votes for you? I don't know how you're gonna do that. Maybe like launch a nuclear strike on the U.S. and take out like 99% of the population. I mean, if we're gonna get absurd with these scenarios, why not we get absurd? Technically, it's possible to become the U.S. president with 12 votes. Technically, it's possible to get elected with 0 votes. Okay, that's actually the correct answer. You can become U.S. president without anyone voting for you. What's crazier though is this map is not just 22% of Americans, it's 22% of voters. So in reality, it's only like 10 to 12% of population. That's what I think about with, not that, we have the perfect system ever here in the US. We don't. But for some of the other countries that have like the multi-party system where they're like House or Congress is divided up between like 5 or 6 or 7 major parties. Like, these countries are being led by a party that was only voted in by like 25% of the voting population, but obviously not of all of Germany voted. So I think it's not insane to assume that some of these parties that are leading countries were only voted in by 12% of the total population. That's insane to think about. It's usually only about half or less than that of people actually vote. This is an absurd scenario where the candidate gets 0 votes in the other states. Absurd, yes, but still technically possible. The United States is the Holy Roman Empire of representative democracy. I really didn't need to have that in my head. The beavers are back, baby. Beaver population in Europe has been exploding. There's certainly one country that's gonna love hearing this news. There is no one happier in the earth to see a beaver than a person from Poland. Boober! Truly a source of national pride right here. And that's only one video. There's countless videos on the internet of like Polish people finding beavers. Just picking them up like a beaver. Boober, kurwa! So this map kind of explains maybe why that's going on. Look, the beaver bober population literally engulfs all of Poland. Maybe that's why. That's why and also consider that like Poland is pretty spread out in terms of population density. Like, there's a whole lot of like human beings that don't actually live in a bunch of the Nordic region, a bunch of these Nordic lands. It's like all over Poland though. Looks like net migration of beavers has been exploding in Europe. Not all of these countries are dealing with population decline, at least in terms of this species. What an amazing map. This actually just makes me so happy. Wow, the red beavers are really defeating the yellow beavers. I met a beaver once on a hike. When it saw me, it began to slap its tail against the water so hard over and over again, I got the hell out of there. Feisty. Maybe they aren't always that friendly. Maybe that's how they say hi though. Bobbers! How they just spawned in Spain without connection to main aerial. Yes, in fact, they were introduced in most countries you see in the second picture. Isn't there, there's some European country that plans to just like have beavers, they're gonna do something. They're gonna make beavers build a dam for them or something. It's Czechia, and it's for this wetland project after years of human delay. Czechia was one of the countries that have a ton of new beavers when they didn't have it 30 years ago. Beavers have saved Czech taxpayers 1.2 million already. Man, I want an army workforce of beavers just to help me build stuff and save me on tax dollars. And big thanks to the people who donate to me on Patreon. I'm Drew, and I identify as an Alabamian supremacist. We're coming for you, Mississippi. Drew's Argentinian Trust Fund. Rip Grandpa. Alexander the Terrible. aPhatNarwhal. Carmel S. Connor Pavlik. Fredrik Tibblin. KingBearHaze. KirinoIsBestGirl. LuxembourgLover. Nolan. If you'd like your name Tambre. Here, go check out that link to Patreon down below.